Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Review, where we discuss in depth the main stories of the day. Now tonight we hope to find out why the Sri Lankan authorities have departed from the World Health Organization's recommendation for the safe management of a dead body during the pandemic and brought in the mandatory policy of cremation. Let me go to Mr. Abdul Haleem. Mr. Abdul Haleem, now you've heard from other panellists tonight, their reasoning around why they're taking legal action, the medical reasoning around why it doesn't make any sense, why bodies have to be cremated. I need to ask you a question here. Now, we had, I believe, the first Muslim died around about March 31st, which was, I believe, a few days after the Sri Lankan Ministry of Health initial guidelines, which actually mirrored the World Health Organization guidelines. The second death then took place around about April 1st. By that time, cremation was something which is being now enforced upon victims of COVID who are Muslim. And then very recently, we had a very difficult death of Baby Sheikh, who's only 20 days old. And despite the remonstrating of the parents not to cremate their baby, the baby was forcibly cremated. Now, against a backdrop of discrimination and hate crimes in Sri Lanka against both the Muslim and the Christian communities, this really sounds like it's a continuation of victimization of minorities. Would you agree?
So, well, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Islam Channel for conducting the Sri Lanka High Commission regarding the government of Sri Lanka's policy on the disposal of human remains of those deceased due to COVID-19. Well, I'm here, a representative of the government of Sri Lanka. I'm here on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka and the people of Sri Lanka to represent my country. Here, I reflect the policy of my government in this regard. So, first of all, I'm not an expert to elaborate further into the technicality of the case you mentioned. So rather, I would say the government of Sri Lanka, like most other countries, set up a COVID-19 committee that includes scientists, epidemiologists, and experienced health administrators. The current procedure adopted by the government of Sri Lanka regarding the human remains of COVID-19 related deaths is based on the recommendation by this committee guided by health-related principles. The government's decision to cremate all COVID-19 infected human remains emanates solely from such health guidelines. This policy remains subject to constant evaluation by the committee of experts based on scientific evidence.
Abdul Haleem, thank you so much. I was hoping that we wouldn't have a scripted reply, but I completely appreciate. But as a human being, as a Muslim, as a father to 3 children, surely, I mean, from just an individual perspective, you must have a view on what is taking place. What is your personal view, if you were to give us that, rather than the view of the Sri Lankan government? If you please.
Yeah, I'm very honest with you. I'm telling that, you know, it's very sensitive. You are asking, very emotional. But I'm a representative of the government, so my duty is to protect the interest of the people of Sri Lanka and the government of Sri Lanka. So I justify in that way. So then I'm not in a position to answer the emotional question you have raised at the moment, please.
Okay, so then I follow up by saying over 189 countries around the world are following the World Health Organization's guideline. There are no countries, to my knowledge, you may correct me, that are currently cremating bodies as a forced policy. So why is it that Sri Lanka has taken this very bold move and saying that anybody must be cremated if they are a victim of COVID-19.
As you correctly mentioned, WHO guidelines is the guidelines.
Correct.
It has persuasive value. We are sovereign government. We can accept the guidelines or we can deviate from the guidelines. This is not a mandatory guidelines to be followed by the government of Sri Lanka. So we totally depends on our expert committee's recommendation. So this is my point of view.
You know, we're hearing that you're not really acting according to the Constitution. Human rights are being breached here. What would you say in response to those, I suppose, those accusations being levelled against the government of Sri Lanka?
Well, you know, in Chapter 3 of the Sri Lankan Constitution enshrines the citizens and the people's fundamental rights. So the religious right is mentioned in Article 10 of the Constitution. It's enshrined the person's religious freedom. So, but basically, this freedom is allowed to exercise anyone in Sri Lanka is in the normal circumstances. But we are currently facing an unprecedented situation all over the world. So, then there may be a limitation. So, if there is a national security or the concerning of public health in Sri Lanka, so then we have to, we cannot exercise wholly this religious freedom. For example, during this pandemic, you know, the government has taken a decision to safeguard everyone in Sri Lanka. We are not targeting any ethnic groups or any minorities in Sri Lanka. This law is common for everyone.
So, Haleem, the question I have for you is you've heard the comments from all of the panellists who have said that, look, this goes against international convention, it goes against your own constitution, it goes against just human rights, and also it just seems to be focused on a minority group which has already faced so much persecution within Sri Lanka. What would you say to that? Do you understand the sentiment of the people, even the world community, who are looking at the actions right now, Sri Lanka, and thinking, why are you persecuting a minority during this time when so many countries around the world have no issues with burying the dead, especially those who are COVID-19 victims?
Well, I'm telling the truth that we are not persecuting anyone in Sri Lanka. Anybody in Sri Lanka. We just generalize the COVID pandemic law equal to everyone. And I would like to say all communities in Sri Lanka have last rights peculiar to their respective cultures and religions, which are practiced under normal circumstances. However, all Sri Lankans have been compelled to part with their deceased loved ones without large gatherings, performing the final rites at short and simple ceremonies due to this unprecedented pandemic. There is understanding among most of them that during a pandemic, priority should be given to protect the living and prevent the spreading of the disease. As a country with modest resources, Sri Lanka is trying its best to ensure the protection of its citizens from the deadly virus. This is what I can say.
So, Haleem, you can appreciate that the UN, even a resident coordinator of the UN within Sri Lanka, as well as Amnesty International, as well as other voices from the global community have said what you're doing really is unfair and it needs to be rethought because it looks like and it smells like the persecution of a minority group. How would you respond to those organisations, or, you know, I suppose humanitarian organisations, who are saying that, look, you really need to rethink this?
So, you know, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, you know, in a normal circumstances, we have you know, protected all human rights of Sri Lankans. This is an unprecedented pandemic, so we need to take, you know, extra care of this disease spreading among communities. So we need to safeguard the spreading of the coronavirus among community. So that's why we have taken a uniform law to control this present pandemic.
So, Haleem, I understand the Prime Minister was looking at a solution, which was to find burial space which could accommodate Muslims who were victims of COVID-19. What has been the result of, I suppose, that investigation by the Prime Minister and his office?
Well, this, you know, this policy remains, as I said, subject to constant evaluation by the committee of experts based on the scientific evidence. So let's wait and see the committee's further recommendation shortly. So if I get to know, then I'm very happy to share with you all.
So, Haleem, you've just heard from Sir Iqbal Sakrani. He's saying that land has been offered, by individuals even, where the dead can be buried. Is there a reason for why those offers have not been taken up thus far?
So, as I said, I can repeat again. So, this policy, the policy remains subject to constant evaluation by the committee of experts. So based on the scientific evidence, we are waiting for the experts committee recommendation to do that.
Okay. The question I have, Haleem, you've heard from all the panellists, and, you know, I think what is shocking from what I've read is on the 1st of December, the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, they dismissed a fundamental rights petition, which means that it was closing any door for any further legal challenge, which doesn't really seem just and fair. But not only that, from what I read, is the Government Medical Officers Association and the Information and Communication Technology Agency, they put forward a proposal to your president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, which signed and said that the Muslim population is the highest weightage of risk when determining the risk of spreading a virus. Now, do you not feel that for the vast majority, if they were to hear that there is an official report that is suggesting that Muslims are probably creating a higher risk of spreading that virus, do you not feel that that really borders on kind of a green light for almost ethnic cleansing?
Oh my God, I am totally against your statement. So we are not doing anything with regard to ethnic cleansing. So we are treating all people equally in Sri Lanka. You mentioned about the Supreme Court verdicts in this regard. I can say that Supreme Court of Sri Lanka is the high apex court in Sri Lanka. So I cannot comment on that decision, please.
To find a resolution to this, what practical steps will the government Sri Lanka be taking, especially after hearing the sentiments of the people around the world on this very emotional issue? What practical steps will the government now be taking in order to find a solution to this specific issue?
So, well, as I earlier mentioned, I repeat again. So we have taken decision in this regard is to protect all communities, irrespective of their religion, cultures, and so on. So still, all communities in Sri Lanka have last rights peculiar to their respective cultures and the religions, which are practiced under normal circumstances. But we are facing a very unprecedented situation all over the world. So this message is to stop spreading or control the spreading of coronavirus.
Will your government, after this, will your government commit to reviewing the forced cremations policy? Is that a yes or a no?
But it is very difficult to say yes or no answer to these questions because basically we depend on the expert committee recommendations. So then we can say after the recommendation is received from the expert committee in this regard.
Dr. Haleem, thank you so much for joining us. It is appreciated, and of course, thank you to the High Commissioner of Sri Lanka as well for participating in the debate.